Hello everyone, I'm Daniel. I'm back for another video about a few decks that I played recently or within the last year or so. And this time we're going to talk about some standalone decks. Got three for you, and I think they're kind of interesting. Just first to give a philosophy about playing standalones. Well, it's a chance for you to play a deck that has a cool hook or idea in it, but you don't really want to see if you can actually make that happen through the course of actual campaign play. Usually, in all of these cases, I believe, in these decks, I have 29 XP. So that means there are three basic weaknesses. The one you get normally plus two extras for standalone mode. But you don't have to worry about how do I get the XP to get this deck going. Because sometimes these ideas don't really function at level 0. They only function with all the pieces in play. Now, all three of these, I believe, I played as part of playing board games, Patron Game Days, I think. So they're in 3 or 4 players, I'll tell you as we go through. And yeah, they're just kind of for fun. So let's get right into this, and we'll look at our first deck, which is a Daisy Walker support deck. Daisy Walker, I think, is a really fun investigator because you can do a bunch of different things with her. Most of the time, people don't, and that's why I think standalone mode is sometimes fun to play something that is a little bit unusual. Yeah, this was with Justin playing Nathaniel Cho Shotgun, also a little unusual and kind of fun. And third player, I believe, was Parallel Monterey Jack. So Justin, obviously, with Nathaniel Cho, was on enemy duty, and Parallel Monterey Jack was just getting clues, and I signed up for support. And what support means is, you do whatever you want, basically, to make sure the other two investigators can do their game plan. And especially with Nathaniel Cho trying to find a shotgun through the entire scenario, Daisy helped him do it. It took a while, but it certainly did. Of course, she's Daisy. She has 5 intellect. Why not get clues too? And yeah, I mean, we got a lot of clues. Let's look at kind of the main things I was trying to do with support. The first thing, this deck was built around a copy of Grey's Anatomy to help further that idea of a shotgun doing a bunch of damage. By the way, the standalone we played, I think, was a custom scenario. It was the Beard's Arkham Incidents, the Tetsuo Mori one. It was a lot of fun, first time I played it. But I mean, maybe there's a little overkill for the scenario, but I think Grey's Anatomy is a neat usage of Daisy's extra tome action. Is it the best thing you can do to like overpower every scenario? Absolutely not. You don't need it, but it is fun to try to use these underplayed cards. And I think this one can basically do it's like a shotgun in itself, right? So unfortunately, I didn't really get it out until towards the end, but I still think it did kind of what I was hoping to do. The rest of the stuff was just basically budget Carson Sinclair. I was using Encyclopedia to give away some stat boosts. Not that we particularly needed it, but it was there. Old Book of Lore, of course, was just a staple in Daisy no matter what you're doing. But I was trying to give this away as much as possible. I put Farsight and Arcane Enlightenment in here as well to hold books and also to play events, because as you can see, there are no skills. You don't need skills for Daisy when she can basically stack intellect and willpower with other cards. But Farsight lets you play an event basically for free. It's not taking an action as long as you've got 8 or more cards. And I love this card to pieces, and it made sense just to sort of play big hand in some sense. So everything we got here tries to take advantage of having a free event all the time. Guidance, this is why I mentioned budget Carson Sinclair. It was sort of a fun idea to give away my actions with some extra skill boost on this, but I was constantly asking, who needs cards? Who needs actions? And the answer was usually not necessary. I think I locked down an enemy weakness with the Existential Riddle. Good card, kind of fun for Daisy 2 playing into big hand. Drawn the Flame is just there because I sometimes think that people play Daisy and ignore all the purple cards because, well, they're not as good as the yellow ones. But, why not Drawn to the Flame to avoid having to take investigate tests, or also to avoid the locations that might have a locked door or some penalty for investigating. It's nice to have that in your pocket. However, the other thing I was hoping to do, which I don't think happened, but I had 2 copies of Stargazing. So, if you have Drawn to the Flame, like, why not pull out the Stargazing? card's not great, but it is fun. And in 3 or 4 player, you'll probably actually make this work, but works with Farsight, right? It's a free event to play. And we got some words of protection, but otherwise, just a bunch of good stuff. And Empirical Hypothesis down here, obviously really good, and Pathfinder as well to just move around the map even more. Prisma, I suppose, for the additional allies here. I don't know if I actually ever used the Research Librarian to find any books. I think I just found them naturally, but at some point in this scenario, I felt like I was doing the support thing, but also I was doing all the clue things on my own, more or less, because I could move around so quickly with Pathfinder and basically another action with the Farsight in play, and, well, Daisy gets an extra action for her old book of lore or encyclopedia anyway, so she's kind of S tier for me, and even trying to tone things down with this build, like there's no grim memoirs or anything, still was incredibly good. Empirical Hypothesis has the peer review on it, by the way. That's, again, try to do as much support as possible, trying to not be selfish, and yet you can still do a lot. All right, let's move on to the next build, which is a Calvin Wright deck, and this one was a little bit more recently in a massive multiplayer War of the Outer Gods, I believe. So I tried to play a little different of a Calvin Wright than I usually do. Well, I mean, they all kind of end up very similar, but this one was as flex as possible. So I have the Meat Cleaver and Peter Sylvester doing a thing together, and that was as good as it always is. But this is the first time I'd ever played Hunting Jacket, and this card is crazy in Calvin when you combine it with Spirit of Humanity, which is already really good. So I was using this to get tons of resources all the time, and I think with Spirit of Humanity, I was able to balance the stats that I wanted at any given time, as well as defeat, say, Devil when I needed to. So we had, I think there's a bunch of swarm enemies in this one. There was a case where I was able to kill a bunch of enemies with this. I think it's always a fun time to try to use the card to the maximum effect, even if you are jumping through a bunch of hoops to do so. I think that's just more fun. That's the game, right? Even if it's not the most optimal thing, it is certainly the most fun thing. But I think the card is good in Calvin, and I didn't have any problem with the direct damage or anything, because of the Spirit of Humanity card is so key in Calvin to just be like, it's okay, we'll put some curses in. No one cares that much about it, and this is a 4-player game. Who else did we play in this one? I think it was Wilson Richards, Preston Fairmont, and that deck was absolutely disgusting. It was double with, like, what was it? Elaborate Distraction. It was just crazy. And then I think we had Amanda also. So a very strong team, I would say, and we did really well. But sometimes Calvin just didn't have anything to do, and kind of sat in a corner and just tried to take tests, because in that scenario there's a lot of locations that just make you take tests to get like one clue at a time, and that was fine. But dealt with the enemies perfectly okay. I wanted to use the lesson learns a little bit more than I could, but I did use them. That's a good card for Calvin. And that's kind of all I need to talk about for this one. I mean, it's pretty balanced between getting clues and dealing damage. There's not a whole lot of survivability. I think I don't even have perseverance or anything. It's just the soak. It's just being able to recur some of these cards using Hunting Jacket, using Spirit of Humanity. That's kind of all you need at this point in the pool for Calvin. You might also say, hey, playing Calvin in standalone mode is a little tough because you haven't accrued all of the trauma. Clearly I took in the thick of it for this one. I think I did for the next one too, or maybe all 3, because you just do it, right? But it is not hard to get him up to stats he wants. It doesn't take too long with these kinds of cards, like toe-to-toe, with Spirit of Humanity. So honestly, like, there's the people who say, take as much trauma as you can in Calvin, and I'm not one of those kind of people. I'm okay with taking the damage and getting a benefit out of it in the scenario itself. I don't need to stack the trauma on purpose beforehand. I mean, you take it because you have a weakness, right? But I'm not of the opinion that you take in the thick of it in Calvin at all, actually. I think you just run the kinds of cards that make you take it on command. What else was cool in this deck? I mean, obviously Sparrow Mask is really good. I usually throw Track Shoes into these sorts of decks to make use of his stats. But again, I don't really play Calvin unless I'm flex, unless I'm trying to use all the numbers. So this is, I think, a good deck that does exactly that. Okay, let's move on to the last one, which is a Bob Jenkins deck. And this one was played in a 4-player as well, standalone of In Too Deep, the third scenario. Yep, third scenario of the Innsmouth Conspiracy. So you can play regular scenarios in standalone mode too. This one's a pretty fun one to play because it is kind of crazy, kind of hectic, a lot going on. Won't talk about it too much, but there are a lot of enemies. And I'm trying to remember who else was on this team. I think there was a Trish. There's always a Trish, right? I don't remember the rest of this team. Anyway, I played a Bob, and this was an exercise in, can Bob, with the new taboo list, play without any scavenging? That's basically a staple in how Bob works. This is not a Bob that gets clues. It is a Bob that got some clues. You do make use of that for intellect sometimes. But this was a Bob that was trying to, honestly, I don't know how it contributed. You use the action to play things for other people, and I did deal damage. You can see that eventually I had this Beretta out. We've got a lot of different cards here because of the Underworld market, which I just always put in rogues now because I think it just lets me fill up slots in a way that is more useful to me. But it makes sense for Bob. We've got Schaffners, we've got Track Shoes again, Sparrow Mask. I don't know if I played anything for anyone else, but I was trying to make a few of these other things happen, like the Elaborate Distraction, which I think is a cool tech card for, honestly, a lot of campaigns. And by tech here, I mean that there's usually situations that you know that there's going to be enemies at connecting locations or lots of little enemies that you can sort of pick off. And this did some work. Friends in Low Places was helping me find my Shrewd Dealings. It didn't happen. We lost it entirely. I think it was towards the bottom of the deck, but that was what it was there for. What else did I do? Oh, 4-player, I think Copycat is a fun card to play. So this one lets you commit cards from other people's discard pile. I don't have a memory of actually using this other than like just pulling something out. Maybe there was like a deduction 2 or something I committed. That's very possible. But it was a fun deck to play, but in standalone mode, I think I spent a lot of time just like discarding weaknesses for other players. But otherwise, it did the trick. We really did do well in this scenario, although it was difficult. I'm not going to spoil this one. I don't know if it's up on Justin's Playing Board Games channel yet. It might be sometime soon, so I don't want to give away how it went, but I would say for the most part, I think I used Pitchfork to a decent effect here too. Bob has 3 combat. It's not a low number, especially when you combine it with Lonnie, with Hard Knocks, with committing skill cards. Like, he can actually deal damage. I know the 4 on his stat line makes it look like he should be just all about getting clues, but he's got the rogue numbers. He's got 3 combat and 3 agility, which is, okay. But that's why, like, there's Knuckle Dusters in here, which is kind of silly. But was it Daniela that was in here? Was I thinking about teamworking Knuckle Dusters over to Daniela? I may have done that just for fun. Like I said, these are not meant to be like the world's strongest decks, but they have some interesting combinations which make the game fun to me and hopefully to you too. So if you see some ideas in here that you want to try out, please feel free to steal these ideas. As you can see here, these were often not like the main character builds. They were support builds. They were just trying to combo some silly things and see what happens. But for the most part, they were able to work. I think I would change a few things, especially in this Bob deck, or maybe just get luckier on a mulligan. That's the other trouble with playing standalone, is sometimes you play a scenario and you lose the card that you really built around. And that happens in an 8 scenario campaign too, but you don't really care because, well, you do care, but you don't really care so much because you know that there's a lot of variance in this game. And one scenario, things will pop off, and then the next scenario, it'll just peter out and things don't work, but that's okay. So that's about it for me. I hope you enjoyed this kind of 2-part series talking about some decks and revisiting some decks that I've seen played recently. Like I said already, try these out if you'd like. They are very fun. I don't put these on a link to these on ArkhamDB usually, but I will for the standalones. I think it's worth throwing them in. I don't like to do it for the campaign ones because they sometimes give spoilers for what happens in the future, but I'll let you look at these. It's a very silly deck here. Of the 3, I mean, I really enjoyed playing the Daisy Walker one. This one I think was a lot of fun because playing support to me is really cool. I think it's worth thinking about. Everyone wants to do the strongest thing and sort of have a lot of attention on themselves, but sometimes you can get a lot of attention by making other people's silly ideas work. That's probably my favorite one of the 3. The Calvin one was a blast to play because I just like playing Calvin, and then the Bob one was really dumb, but it did make me happy to play it. Notably, you know, the 2 investigators with extra actions, I think, Bob and Daisy, are fun to play because you can make things work even if you get some bad draws. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you back again next week.